Thank all you guys for joining me for this event, and to be honest, for letting me be part of it. I've been a fan of Don since I read Knock 'em Stiff way back, and I don't know, over 10 years ago. And when I found out that there was going to be a movie of The Devil All the Time, of course I was thrilled. And then when I saw y'all had part in it, I was even more excited. And it's everything that I could have hoped that it would be. So thanks for making a great film based on a great book that I really love and respect. So Don, speaking of your book, I would like to start by asking you, if you would, particularly about the novel, which is sitting right here, if you would just give us, the audience, kind of a quick synopsis of the novel, and then maybe tell us what drew you to the idea that made you want to spend that much time writing about these people.
Sure. Well, the novel takes place over 20 years, from 1945 to 1965. And, it's got several different storylines running through it, but eventually everybody sort of meets or, collides or whatever you want to call it. But the main character is a young boy named Arvin Eugene Russell. And then we have him, from his birth to his about 20 years old or so. And so yeah, I mean, there's just there's a lot of stuff going on. And there's a couple of serial killers, there's several sort of corrupt preachers, and it's really hard for me to tell anybody, well, what's this book about, or anything like that. As far as when I started the book, I envisioned a novel about a serial killer couple, Carl and Sandy Henderson. I was going to write this entire book about just them. I was going to focus on them. But after I got about maybe 60, 70, 80 pages into it, I realized that probably not very many people were going to want to read a book about just these two despicable people. And then I started adding, I came up with the idea of Arvin and then his father and on and on. But it's, there was just a lot of typing involved to try to figure this thing out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I love how casually you threw in that it's got a couple of serial killers in it. It's like, why not? Why not? So Paulo and Antonio, I know y'all co-wrote the screenplay, and kind of the same question I asked Don. What drew y'all? Because this is when I found out y'all were making the movie. I remembered reading the book, and I reread it recently. There is a lot going on in this book. We've got Arvin Russell. We've got his father's war trauma that's delivered upon Arvin. We do have this roving serial killer couple. We have the no good charlatan preacher. There are a lot. We have the two the cousins that are healers and preachers and all this stuff. There's a lot going on. So what drew the two of you, and whoever would like to go, maybe Paulo start us off, but what drew you to this novel to want to put it on the screen?
Well, I was working on a novel at the time. Tony recommended that I check out the book, and that he was thinking of turning it into a film. And I had a 9-to-5 office job at the time, and I would take about a week in July and a little bit more in the winter, like around New Year's, and just use that time to write. And it tended to be pretty productive. I could get a big chunk of the novel I was working on done. And it was just around that time that he told me about The Devil All the Time. And I thought, well, this is great, because I could spend the morning reading chunks of the book, and, we could then maybe talk about it at the end of it. And I went into reading the book just as a reader, because he tends to recommend good stuff. So I thought I'll probably read an interesting book at least. And then at the end of it, I'll start thinking about whether or not to shift from working on my book to doing like a whole new endeavor. And I broke that promise to myself before the end of the book. There's a point kind of when you start to see the way, like Don was saying, characters are going to start to kind of collide. I thought this would be, well, first, the characters are fascinating. And I think there's so many like kind of cinematic moments that I kept being able to picture on screen. But the challenge of trying to get on screen or to recreate the feeling of kind of dread that you have when you know that things are going to merge seemed like such a challenge that it was kind of irresistible to do. Plus, I had the benefit of working with my brother, who I love his work. And so I wasn't kind of just out there on my own doing something for the first time. You know, it was something we'd be able to throw ideas back and forth. And I was genuinely interested to see what he thought of it, because we hadn't talked about, he was just like, read this, and I think you'll like it. And then, you know, we started a discussion.
Well, Antonio, what about you? What drew you to the novel? He talked about cinematic moments. Was there a point when you were reading it where you thought, "Oh my God, I've got to think about this in terms of making it into a film, or think about it visually"?
It really. I'm sorry. Am I getting an echo? Am I echoing again, or is it no? Okay.
You're fine.
Good. The thing that grabbed me, like everything Paulo said, it was the way that everything comes together. But the things that grabbed me were the fact that Don figured out a way of creating a hybrid between our two favorite genres, which are Southern Gothic and sort of hard-boiled crime fiction, you know. And so he somehow, this book captures the essence of like everything that I love about those genres. The other thing is the themes of the theme of the way that Don explored the relationship between faith and violence in the book, I thought was really powerful, and was something that I was really interested in exploring on screen. And Don had, I mean, just the image of the prayer log alone, like that was really the first, I was like, this, I've never seen anything like this. And I would love to figure out how to translate it to a real place, to screen. And then the final thing is that I thought and Paulo and I both love the fact that there's the spine of the book, the thing that holds it all together, begins and ends the story, is this relationship between a father and a son, and the story of the trauma that the son inherits. It's so tied up with religion, and how he will how deal with it. I mean, the sort of the book leaves you at a point where, you know, where you don't know how he's going to either move on or go down the same path his father did. And the fact that was the spine of the book, that generational story, was just kind of like, it was beautiful the way that it all kind of came together. And anyway, and like Paulo said, we realized it was a challenge, and it's always a challenge. I've adapted one other thing that didn't get made, that I just kind of walked away from because I didn't love it. Was I had adapted a book, and that book I started to adapt because I thought there was a seed of a good idea, and I didn't love the book. And in this case, we just loved the book. We just loved everything about the book. And so, you know, loving something that much, it was inspiring. And also just, we felt like we had to live up to this thing that Don had created.
So I think Paulo referenced it just a moment ago, and Antonio, you did kind of as well. But Don, I want to ask you, I'm thinking about, and I want to tell you that over the years in craft talks, and if I'm teaching, I've discussed the opening scene of the novel so many times. The wonderful, almost tactile way you establish tone. Arvin and his dad trudging across the field. The fog is pressing you down. There's briars. It's rocky, gray. There's mushy leaves. There's decay about it. Can you talk about setting tone on the page and how you go about doing that?
Well, I don't know if I can explain how I do it or anything like that. I'm not a very optimistic person. So most of my stuff tends to be a bit dark, and it's just sort of a natural, it's not natural maybe, but I'm just sort of, um, I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that question. I don't know how I do it. Uh, and, as I tell everybody, and as I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, I just keep typing until, it's sort of, okay, I think this might do it, this might work, or this is good, or this is bad, or, whatever. But I think part of it just has to do with my disposition.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, and the last couple years of, as I said, I'm not very optimistic, and I've become more and more pessimistic as of late. And yeah, I just, it's just, I don't think I could ever write what someone would call a happy story. I've tried, and it just doesn't work for me. Yeah.
So do you have like an emotion that's in your mind that you're reaching for on the page, or are you really just typing to see what tone or emotion you arrive at?
Well, one thing that does help me sometimes with trying to find the right tone is I will say select 3 or 4 songs,
Mm-hmm.
and I will play them over and over and over, those same songs, while I'm working, until it gets to the point where I don't even know that they're playing anymore. But yeah, that will sort of get me there sometimes if I need help.
Sure. Paula, what about you in writing it? Was there a tone you were reaching for, or like an emotional fuel you were writing from, or you were trying to get it on the page, or what were you trying to kind of hang? I don't know what I'm getting at, like emotion, the emotion. Like, what were you trying to do with the screenplay?
Well, I mean, we had in the logistics of writing our first draft, we had kind of identified the story arcs that we wanted to tell, and didn't really put a limit on how long they would be. We assumed we'd end up with kind of a large first draft, and then cut things back, which was for me comfortable territory, because I tend to write a lot and then have to deal with and then find the story kind of in however long of a thing I've written. So part of that involved adding some additional scenes that the novel says happen but doesn't depict. But because it would be a film, we'd have to depict it. So the scene, for example, between Teagarden and Lenora in the car, it's referred to in the book, but it's not dramatized. So that was a real challenge, because I wrote the first draft of that and had to try to figure out what sorts of things, where Teagarden might rhetorically put himself in a way that would, he would get her to think that what she was doing wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the better part of a week to write it. And I wrote to really figure out kind of to get that to click, like how possibly that could work. And then when it finally did, it was like really satisfying to be done, but I also felt like really icky. Because I felt like that I had kind of keyed into the character. I also didn't know if it was something that would end up in the final draft, because it seemed like a really uncomfortable scene to read. I didn't know what people would think when they read it. The same thing I think with the scene where it's not fully in the movie. Sophia, my sister-in-law who edited the film, did a really great job of kind of arranging the scene where Carl and Sandy commit a murder. But in our first draft, that whole murder is kind of written out. It's implied in the book, but in the draft, I felt the right way to tackle it at first was to depict a whole thing, and that was also rough to figure out what they would, what they might do.
Mm-hmm.
And the tone the film strikes is really I think that scene feels to me a lot like the book, is really to the credit of the work that Tony and Sophia did when they were editing it. That I think there's a really nice cut from when they take a picture of the guy to the next scene that captures the novel, I think, better than what we had in our first draft.
Well, Tony, if I can call you Tony, but can you talk about tone and emotion and maybe cutting the movie and directing the movie and how you felt reading the book? Is that what you wanted to put on the screen on an emotional level?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted the film to have a kind of breathless quality in the sense that this was an intense ride from the beginning to the end. And the book because you read the book over the course of several days. It's a similar experience, but you feel it. But the movie, because of the condensed nature of a film, it's even more. It feels more intense. But we embraced that, and we just wanted to sort of tap into that sort of dark energy that's in the book and that dark humor that's in the book, and part of that was also came from the voiceover element and Don's tone and Don's kind of that tone that the narrator had, the tone the narrator strikes. That's kind of, he has a bit of a sense of humor about the whole thing because he can see so far ahead and he can see how all these things are going to shape up. The other thing, though, that was very important was that because it is such a sort of dark, intense story, you do need to punctuate it with moments of lightness. You need to sort of inject moments of sweetness and kindness throughout. And it's in the book, but again, we kind of like a scene that we invented for the film that's alluded to in the book is the moment where Willard and Charlotte see each other again. And then also the moment there was the sense that we wanted to sort of build out them meeting the first time and to sense what it is about Willard, what is about Charlotte that Willard loves.
Mm-hmm.
And just a simple moment of kindness is all we needed to sort of figure out. And so yeah, so it was this kind of making sure that we sort of we had this balance of dark, light, humor, intense drama, and very emotional scenes, and then ultimately, I guess the other sort of big sort of aspect, the thing that was really important in the edit, that was very unique to the movie, that you have a different experience with in the book, is that you need to know as an audience to come back to Arvin in a way. You know, you need to know that when you take these kind of detours with these other characters, that you have a sense that it's going to come back into the sort of Arvin Willard storyline. So it was a very fine balance of like, you want to go and spend time with them, get to know them, get like very intimate moments with people like Sandy and Carl and Bodecker and Roy and Helen, but you can't be away from Arvin for too long. Mm-hmm. And so that was the kind of the trick that we were always kind of, always trying to figure out, just as how long can we be away, just how much, just get all the juiciness that we can out of every storyline, and always kind of, not tell the audience that it's going to come back to Arvin, but just give them the sense, that this is going to all kind of come together in some way.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense now that I think about it, because both in the novel and in the film, Arvin is the emotional core of the entire film and the novel. And so the viewer's hand does always have to be on him, because you do have this team of serial killers. You have the cousins, the preachers, you have all this other stuff going on, but Arvin is the straight shot of emotion through the whole thing, novel included. So Don, you mentioned music and how you would listen to songs to kind of get you in the headspace to write, or you could just turn on the news, whatever works in the moment to get you there. But can you think some of the songs that you were listening to when you were writing this book? Like, what kind of music were you listening to get into The Devil All the Time?
Well, I can't really, some of the titles escape me right now, but there were a couple Black Keys songs. There was a song by Golden Earring. I don't know if you've even heard of the Golden Earring or not, but there was a song called Nomad by Golden Earring that, I don't know how many, I probably played that song 500 times. I don't know. There was a couple Clutch songs. So there were probably altogether, I had about 12 songs. And I just had them on I recorded them on a CD, and I would just play that thing. And so there was that. And then another thing, though, that I thought of is, for some of that stuff, for some of the sadder moments, I guess, I always rely on, if I have to, I think back on some, just a couple bad memories I have to sort of get me in that mood. But one would be the death of my absolutely favorite dog, and that'd just get me there. But the songs, there were just a few, and there were just songs that I, for that book, they just fit, or at least fit in my head anyway.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. What about for Paulo and Tony? He said Black Keys. Y'all decided to go a little bit different direction. We have kind of a high lonesome sound, Appalachian sound, a lot of gospel. Can y'all talk about the role of music in the film and how music really set the texture for so many scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's important to note that the person that started off this whole journey, I mean, it's Don, but then after Don, it was Randall Poster, who was the first person to read the book and gave it to me. And Randy is best known as a music supervisor. He's a very prolific and probably the only sort of music supervisor I can think of that is sort of known by name, because he does all of Wes Anderson's movies, he does Scorsese's movies, he does Todd Haynes' movies. So he has this amazing ear, and he has this amazing encyclopedic knowledge of music. And so the conversations about music started even before we started writing a script. Randy started to make playlists from the beginning and shared those with me and Paulo, and we listened to them a lot. And then, I mean, a lot of those songs didn't even end up in the movie. It was really just sort of but it set the tone, that sound that you're describing. So we had that sound in our heads. And then as we started to make the movie, it was very much like, I mean, it was just, we would get, Sophia, my wife, and Sophia's my editor and my wife, and she would get these long playlists, and we would just start to listen and choose the ones that we really liked. And sometimes Randy would be like, this is a great song for this scene. And just the nature of making movies, that process goes from, that goes until the very, very end. Like that the sound mix is kind of like the last thing that gets done. So you're constantly changing that. And then all of a sudden you find out the piece of music is too expensive and you can't afford it. So then you have to find another song. But we really were looking for something that set place and time. you know, because the other thing in this book that's so important in the story is that we're traveling over 20 years, you know, and so you want your audience to feel that jump in time, and instead of reminding them with a subtitle that says the date all the time, the shift in the sound of the music does a lot of that work for you. And so, you know, besides just setting the tone of the scenes or being a counterpoint to tone, as like the sort of the young love track that we use over Arvin beating the crap out of the bullies, it's really kind of transporting us from one time to another.
And you talked about swinging between the tones. Can you talk about the role of gospel music and the spiders in the church scene? Because you have this beautiful old time gospel that's being sung, but then there's a moment where it just kind of turns ominous.
Yeah.
And and the viewer is like, oh no, this is dark. Can you talk about how you swung that scene in particular?
That's a great scene, but in terms of the music, because that was one where we had to find a track. We had to find just the right track that these two guys could sing, and that would really kind of lift your spirits, would kind of speak to the transcendent quality of gospel music, and create a kind of transcendent, warm scene. The music kind of like, it just and it was very much the way it felt on the day. I remember when those two guys, Pokey Lafarge, who plays Theodore, if people don't realize, he's a fantastic musician, you know, and he kind of has that sound. And so the idea of that scene was very much about was let's kind of have these two religious experiences rubbing up against each other. And in some way, you know, the combination of these two experiences speaks to Willard and the prayer log, and where he eventually gets to, sort of an extreme act of religion in the spiders. So this kind of transcendent, beautiful, spiritual moment of music that pivots into this kind of dark, ominous, expression of faith, test of faith. That then, you know, it plants a seed in Willard's mind visually for us as the audience too, that prepares us for the extremes that he goes to.
I think that a lot of our viewers in the Appalachian tradition will be aware that people from time to time might handle snakes and religious services, and your folks choose to handle spiders as a sign of overcoming fear, or I guess Don's folks do. Don might have grown up handling spiders.
That was all Don's idea.
For all I know. Paulo, I want to ask you about, I think Tony referenced Don's narrative voice in the writing. And I feel like, and Paulo, being a novelist and a fiction writer, you can speak to this as well. I feel like Don's narrators, unless they're first person actor characters, they're always kind of removed, kind of like a god. They're looking back, they're looking ahead, they're offering asides. They're funny in the darkest of moments, and to Tony's point, it does bring that levity. Were you thinking about the narrative voice when you were writing the screenplay, and were you thinking about bringing Don in as a narrator? And if not, when did you decide to do that?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the idea of using a narrator was something that we had on the table from the outset. But we didn't have an idea of what the boundaries of the narrator would be, like what would be the character of the narrator. So our first draft proceeded with adapting the novel without a narrator. And conceivably, that was an aspect that could be added in. So by the time we were, I think, on our third draft, Tony met Don, and he spent several days in Chillicothe, and I joined him for a couple days, and we went to see Knock Up Stiff, and like really was really generous with his time and showed us around. And it was during that trip that Don doesn't read the audiobook for Devil, or I think for his other books. And Tony asked him if he'd mind reading a few sections of Devil so we could, kind of hear. And it was, and it's just such a, I think it's one of several pivotal moments during the whole writing process that hearing him read it kind of defined the boundaries of what the narrator would be. It's not like there were exact rules that were clear in that moment, but the authority that was in Don's voice reading it really felt like this was how this would work. Mm-hmm. And it was, so then we went back to the screenplay to see where a narrator would help us, a narrator would add to the story, because I mean, one of the things that I saw as challenging about adapting it was that these aren't characters who confide in one another. It's the narrator who shows us so much, and these characters see so little of what's going on. And even the Arvin of the book, as he's approaching the end, doesn't entirely know everything that the full implications of what's happening to him or what he's involved with. And it's just the kind of irony of how little the characters know is one of the things that I think makes it such a kind of a thrilling novel to read. And then being able to kind of use a narrator in our film was a way to get, like, there was no way to say, there's a line that the narrator has that gives us kind of a peek into Carl when he says, for Carl, killing was a kind of a religion. Mm-hmm. And there's no, the amount of screen time to convey that otherwise would be, I can't imagine how much more time. The economy that a narrator would give us in that moment was great. And that was often the case with what the narrator would allow us to do as writers, was to add something about the character that there was just not a way to depict in a concise way without, I mean, the film getting to be extraordinarily long. I had the pacing that we were going for.
I really liked how y'all used Don's narration to compress time with narrative summary, and also to dip into the interiority of the characters. And Tony, I want to ask you about a particular scene, and we don't have to reveal anything, but it's the scene where Lenora makes a very drastic decision, and Don's narration comes in at a really beautiful, revelatory moment that can't be pulled back from. How did you decide when to bring Don's narration in to show those moments of interiority where a character has an awakening? Or Paulo mentioned Carl's, the reason he kills is the closest expression he can get to God. He never says that, but to know that, how did you make those decisions?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so much of it, so a lot of that is the script is the guide, and but ultimately when you get to the edit, you're taking your cues off of the performance. And when does your actor tap into some energy or some moment where it's just, you see into their eyes and you see them doing the thinking. The actors they all the script with the narration, and they knew the sort of the games of the scene, whatever. So and these actors are so fantastic and so sensitive and nuanced and just kind of like can convey these very profound things in moments. And with the one with the Lenora, it was very much about finding that right moment where you have the audience have a sense of what she's doing, but there's this thing that you see in Eliza's eyes where you feel this thing, like that shift in the way she's thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's when Don's voiceover comes in, strikes, sets something up, and then we upend it. Mm-hmm. In that situation. And then with Carl, for instance, it was like, that was, when we figured out the game that we were going to play with the photograph, then jumping to Carl singing Wings of a Dove, and then sort of withholding the rest of the scene. Again, it was sort of looking for the moment in the performance where there was a strange, mysterious look, this kind of scary thing that was coming through Jason Clarke in that moment, where Don's voiceover would sort of supplement, would fill in, like whoa, that's what's going on with him. And then, and then you have the moment of violent transcendence where he's mounting this guy and completely dominant over him as he's bleeding to death. And then we come back and the narrator says he's a sick fuck. Yeah, it was so much of it is it's the script, and then the final phase of any film, the final phase of writing for any film is the edit. And then really at that point you're reacting to the performance and seeing what they're doing and trying to play off of that.
Speaking of Carl's character, Jason Clarke is absolutely terrifying in this movie. Everything about the way he carries his body, the way his face looks, his movements, his dialogue, his rationale. I mean, he's just fantastic in the film. So Don, I want to ask you, I'm thinking about Knock 'em Stiff, your first book, your story collection, which I love. I met you not long after it came out. I met you actually in West Virginia, kind of your home territory. I was teaching up there. And when I think about Knock 'em Stiff, I think about that map when you open the early pages of the book. And I think about you, the writer, having that map in mind when you're writing that book or when you're writing Devil All the Time. How do you think of the narrator? Do you think of the narrator in Devil All the Time or in your other work as someone looking down on a map and talking about these people as they go about their lives? How do you envision the narrative role?
Well, yeah, sort of like that. I mean, maybe not looking down on it, but just sort of somebody making an account, of everything that is going on in this little area of Ohio. And, say, for example, with my last book, with The Heavenly Table, part of it starts in Georgia, part of it is, right outside of Knock 'em Stiff, and then most of it takes place here, in what I call Meade, Ohio, or in Ross County. And as far as I can see ahead, all of my work will be based here, and I'm just, this is the place that I know. I don't know any other place well enough to write about it, to write about it in a convincing way, anyway. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the way I see it, it's just me telling, I'm trying to come up with my own history of this place, sort of. And, as far as the geography and stuff like that goes, I try to stick to the facts. It's if you would take that map and if you could go back a few years, you could take that map and go out there and yes, there's the bridge, there's the hill, whatever. So I do try to stick to the geography and, of course, the climate and the fauna and all that stuff. But That's how I see it anyway.
One thing I've always appreciated about your work, Don, and also the film is it reminds me of the Chekhov line. Chekhov has the famous line, if you introduce a gun in the first act, you got to use it in the fifth act, or whatever that line is. But he's also got a line that says, horse thieves shouldn't be bad because they're horse thieves. They should be bad because they're bad. And the objectivity that y'all bring to the characters, both Don in your books and Paulo and Tony in this movie, we just watch them. You don't present them on the screen as being any preconceived idea of who these people are. We literally just watch them almost from the inception of the course that we see them take. And it's just, it feels like a respectful way to portray life on the screen and on the page. I don't know if that was something
that's a really good point, Wiley, because that is something else that I would say that I really responded to in Don's writing, because even in my work as a filmmaker, that's how I always approach characters. I've made films about very unlikable, complicated people, and made the audience spend a lot of time with them, and not pass judgment, and left that kind of open to the audience to do. And I just am interested in that, and I think making an account is a really good way of kind of describing the process or thing that I'm interested in. It's kind of watching these things unfold, and as we're kind of adapting and creating a character, or in this case adapting characters to the screen, it's a lot of it is sort of looking for the humanity in them, and then from the page to the performance, that's another layer that every actor is trying to bring to the character, and even sometimes you cast, because the person that you're putting into this role is going to counterbalance the things that person, the character does, and then complicate them in a way. And but again, you're just kind of presenting it and not trying to pass judgment on it.
So I want to talk about two scenes in particular in the book that we don't pass judgment on, because they're presented so beautifully, and the causality that lies at the core of them is so strongly rendered. The first scene is when Willard, grown man, Arvin, his son, are out at the prayer log. Willard has created this shrine because he is trying to sort through evil in his own mind, his tragedy from war. And there are two hunters who oversee father and son praying. And they say awful things about Willard's wife, about Arvin's mother. And then we see Willard biding his time and going and executing his revenge. Fast forward 15, 16 years, we see Arvin doing something very similar. And the way you paralleled those two acts in the film, where Arvin's sister is being harassed sexually by some boys at school, and Arvin goes to exact his revenge, they were not paralleled so cleanly in the novel. But in the film, seems like even some of the what's the tagline? There's a lot of sons of bitches in the world.
A lot of good, no good sons of bitches.
No good sons of bitches. Can you talk about the decision? You talked about kind of tracing an emotional thread through. Can you talk about that decision to parallel those two scenes?
Yeah, I mean, one of our jobs in terms of adapting it was kind of going, what are the key moments to the story? What are the moments that define these characters? What are the moments or scenes that capture the essence of these characters? And so that transference, the thing that Willard passes on to Arvin, is so key. So how do we visually communicate that? And so you look for ways to parallel them, not just thematically, but visually. And so, in this sense, we look for the car is like kind of a key thing. The way that Bill performed his return to the car is very much in line with the way that Tom performed his return to the car. So you're looking for an emotional echo. So all those things, and then you lay on, you know, the voiceover to kind of key you in even further, and that's kind of it. You know, in the book, you know, you have so many more instances where you can explore those things, but in a film, you have to kind of really kind of find your moments, and so that's how we kind of landed on that. And that is such that to us, that moment, I mean, it's really, I mean, the Willard and the poachers, beating of the poachers, that's the first scene in the book, really. I mean, it's basically the prologue, right? And so that was one of our favorite scenes, and we just felt like that we had to really nail that scene, and then nail the Arvin doing the same thing, and then we'd really kind of nail that idea.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask a big question at the end. I want to ask our audience members, if you have a question, go down to where it says ask a question, and I'll feed your question to Don or Paulo or Tony. But I have one last question, and this is for Paulo or Tony or whoever wants to answer. This is a novel with, and I mentioned Chekhov. It reminds me a little bit of the Russian writers, where we're sliding through all these points of view in a scene. I mean, the camera's mind is moving through so many people in the novel, especially. How did y'all decide for the film or the screenplay who was going to get the POV in a scene, who was going to get the POV in a moment, and when to bring in certain scenes? Final film.
I think this is a really fascinating thing to see, because one of the real joys of collaborating on the screenplay was that we had spent a couple weeks, well, more like a couple months probably, like writing our respective sections of adapting our sections of the novel, and then kind of keeping tabs on, you know, reading each other's work and kind of saying, hey, this seems to be working. Let's push forward a bit on why don't you push forward a bit on that? And making connections, seeing like different ideas about stuff that might be worth kind of adding. Wasn't in the book. And then when we put everything together, a lot of the ideas that are like what Tony was just saying, of where things were kind of resonating along the Willard Arvin kind of spine, that's where we started having kind of really exciting moments in both cutting down the larger document that we had and seeing what really rose to the top in terms of what scenes to keep. Mm-hmm. But that process then continued on beyond when they went into pre-production and started to shoot. I visited Birmingham just before they started filming, and all the stuff that they had in the offices there with the art direction and the costumes and stuff like that was just amazing to see, because a lot of it was just like I imagined it, or even better. And then as the various edits went, I mean, Tony can speak to how that goes, because then it's kind of, there's more refinement that goes on.
Yeah, in terms of it, yeah, I mean, it was you kind of, in terms of this film, it's tricky because we're not withholding a lot, but you got to withhold just enough so that the audience, there's a little bit of mystery that you're holding on to, and you don't want to give away too much of the character because you need somewhere to go. So it was just kind of like what it was basically the first 10 minutes was kind of key to this, because we had to set up the rules of the game. I think the first 10 minutes of any movie is where you set up the rules of the game. And, we visually we start super wide on a map, and then we get kind of, these kind of tableaus of life and Knock 'em Stiff. And then we go in for a close up on Willard. And I think, seeing Willard in close up for the first time suggests, oh, this is our main character, right? And then once he gets to the diner, that's where we say to the audience, oh wait, there's another game that we're playing here, which is there are other characters and their stories matter too. And then we get the taste of that with Carl and Sandy, and we leave and we stay with Willard, and then we have the similar thing with Roy and Theo and Helen. So it was really kind of, once we set up the idea that there is going to be multiple characters in the film, and you can leave your main character for other characters, then we felt a little more freedom as we went along to do that again, because we set up that language and that grammar, whatever. So and then once you get in the edit, you kind of feel it out and figure out how you're going to what POV you're going to be in when.
We have a couple of questions that have come in. One question is from, let's see, who is this one from? It's to Don. It says, how did it feel for you to see your characters on the screen, these people that you'd spent so much time with over the years writing this book? What was the process of seeing them kind of animated on the screen? How did that feel?
Well, it felt great. I didn't know anything about, movie making or, any of the thing at all about the process. And, Antonio would say, well, I think I might have Tom Holland for this part, or he'd mention somebody else. And, and I would think Tom Holland, which, I didn't really, I knew who he was, but that was about it. But, it was like, it was sort of like I couldn't see Tom Holland as the character, but then in the movie, it was like he was perfect, and it just amazed me so much that, say with Jason Clarke or just about anybody who's in it, it was such a surprise, that these people were able to look and act so much like, the characters I had in my head all those years ago. So yeah, it was, the whole thing gave me just a newfound respect for acting and movie making and all that, because it was really amazing, I thought, the way that everything turned out.
And also, as much time in the region as I have, the accents, the mannerisms, the clothing were just gorgeous. It was just so stunning. And to the last question that we've got one of my former students actually is asking this question about favorite characters. And my former student Corey, we read Knock 'em Stiff in an honors freshman class. It was a thematic class of coming of age literature, and we read Knock 'em Stiff. And those students, they're 18 years old. They're like, "What the hell are you having us read?" But Corey and some other folks have asked, and I'll ask this to Paulo and Tony to kind of lead us out. There's a lot of heavy hitters in this film. I mean, these are major young actors already making a huge name for themselves. But that aside, reading the book, who were the characters that you just really wanted to nail? You just really wanted to nail Arvin, or who were the people that you really wanted to get right that just drew you in?
I mean, the pressure is to get them all right.
Sure.
It's a lot of them. There are a lot of them. And I think the one that was the one where it was like, we got to get this right because it's such a big swing, but it's so damn good. He's and the reason why Rob wanted to play him is Teagarden. I mean, Rob, I gave Rob a second draft of the script, and I said, look, man, whoever you want to play, tell me. Just tell me who it is. And he came back and said, Teagarden. And I said, really? You want to play Teagarden? And he said, yeah, he knew that this was the juiciest character. but we were going for it. We were going, straight off what, the way that Don described him in the book. And that's like, those are some bold choices. And so we, you just want, when you take those big swings, it could go one of two ways. And I feel like that is the speeches and some of the most beautiful speeches comes from Paulo's Wild Mind. The Delusions one specifically is one of my favorite things in the film. And so I feel like I was so through the editing and everything, was just like, I was always trying to, that was an obsession, and I'm very happy with the way that it turned out.
Yeah, to those who don't know, Rob is Robert Pattinson, and he plays this flamboyant, outrageous, over-the-top, evangelical Jerry Falwell meets Jimmy Swaggart meets Jim Baker meets, I don't know, porn star. And into it. What about you, Paulo? Was there a character that you really were excited to drill down into?
I mean, Teagarden was the one that was the most challenging. So I suppose I felt like we needed to see the sermon that Tony referred to was written to kind of appear the way it does in the film, where it's interspersed with another sequence, with another scene going on, because that's pretty heavy. And so I thought, well, maybe we could cut back and forth between this. And they did a nice job of kind of adjusting the amount it went back and forth. And but I think most of what I wrote was kind of intact, and it's very close to what I was writing. I was trying to think of, like, because I don't think it's explicit in the film, but in the book he studied psychology, and so so he's projecting here. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't really want to be doing this. He's more interested in psychology, but he's probably not that good at that. And if he were to put these two things together, what would that say look like if he's having some sort of public episode? But the only people that are going to be able to identify it would be the audience. And so I thought, well, maybe he does some kind of a half-assed reading of the Bible. And I could see people coming away from that sermon and thinking that made a lot of sense, and some people being like,
then they all just go to Cracker Barrel afterward.
Yeah. but the impact of it really is going to, for the audience, is going to carry through with the other characters. So, but finding the right way to kind of, or finding a way that it felt like that we were carrying the spirit of Teagarden from the book in the film with new scenes. Anytime you're adding something, it was always it's very nervous if you're adding. I'd never been in a position where, like, one of the things I studied was adaptation or an original and like author manuscripts when I was in graduate school. And so it was a really new position to kind of be, say, adding something to an author's work in this way. And it was a nervous position to be in. So the fact that Don speaks highly of the film is really one of the most gratifying parts of it.
It's a wonderful film, and it's a wonderful book. Don, thank you so much for letting me do this. Tony, Paulo, thank you all for letting me join you as well. Check out the novel, The Devil All the Time. Buy it from your local independent.
Thank you for doing this. While great.
Yeah.
And watch the film on Netflix. You won't regret it. And so thank you all so much.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you, Wiley. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Bye,
everyone.
Don, Lonnie.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Wiley.